the journey from fourth, fifth grade teacher to game developer, like literally coding these Breakout Plus games. Like, what's that origin story look like? Hello, and welcome to the Game On podcast. My name is Adam Bellow. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Breakout EDU, but I'm also a father, a serial edtech entrepreneur, and an advocate for positive change in the classroom. Each episode of the Game On podcast is going to feature a new voice from someone who's making an amazing impact and helping to pave the way for the future of education. We're going to get to explore their ideas and opinions, as well as learn about some of the successes and failures that made these amazing educational gurus who they are. All right, let's get started. Welcome to the Game On podcast. I am Adam Bellow, I'm your host, and I am so excited to be joined by the one and only amazing Ann Brucker. Ann, welcome to the podcast. Oh, it's so nice to have you. Now, for those of you listening or watching at home, Ann and I work together, so it's a really rare treat that I get to sit down with someone that I am so lucky to spend so much of my day with, or my week with, and for many years now. It's been a long road, but a great one, and it's just a pleasure to talk to you. So Ann is currently serving as one of the directors of games at Breakout EDU, and has been here since 2018.
That's hard to say. Yeah, I was trying to think, is it 2017 or 2018?
2017,
in my
maybe.
heart, it was longer because I was making games with Patty for a year or so before that. So, it's been a while.
Yeah. It's definitely been a while. It's been incredible. Yeah. So Ann's one of my favorite people. She's one of the most creative people I know. But we'll get that out of the way as a disclaimer. She's awesome. And is responsible for bringing so much of what we do at Breakout to life. We have two incredible directors of games. Ann mentioned Patty a moment ago. Patty's been here since the beginning. And then Ann came in shortly thereafter. And we also work with Monica, who's not only our head of customer interaction and support, but also works part-time with the games team. So we're a small games team, but a mighty one. And Ann has taken on the challenge of building Breakout Plus, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in just a bit here. So awesome stuff. If you've played Breakout, you've definitely played a game that Ann has created. So really thrilled to dive in a little bit. And Ann, you started as a third and fourth grade elementary school teacher, right?
Fourth and fifth, yeah.
Oh, fourth and fifth.
Yeah, my first year I had a 4-5 combo. What were they thinking?
Well, it keeps you on their toes. I mean, that's definitely, they're fun.
I didn't even know what I didn't know. So it was like, well, you might as well learn two things at once. So,
well, learning things is something that you're really good at. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So anyway, we'll dive in. I'm super excited to ask you some of the questions that we ask all of our guests here. And then we'll kind of get more specific into kind of your experience building games for Breakout, which is awesome. So play is super important. As you know, we're all focused on making learning fun. And I'd love to know, you play tons of games. In fact, you've introduced me and the team to literally, I can't even count how many games where you've shown it to us, and I've wound up purchasing it for our kids and my family to play, which is awesome. It's a good addiction to have. But what games did you play as a kid? Like, where did you start with your gaming journey?
Good question. We had a lot of board games at home. I remember playing Concentration and Operation, those like super high stress games, but also Monopoly, Scrabble. My mom was really into words and stuff and very verbose, she would always say. And so we liked to play Scrabble together, and my brothers and I, cards and dice games and things like that. But then I remember in third grade, I don't remember if it was a particular day of the week or just at free time or inside. I don't remember exactly, but the teacher always had games. And so we learned Uno and Boggle and kind of those old standby type games that just were always there and available for us to play. So, I mean, I learned how to shuffle cards in third grade. And that was kind of like the meat of my fun memories of gaming in school being tied together were probably there. Probably a lot of things, actually, in my third grade class.
I love that. I love watching people. I love that you said you learned how to shuffle cards at that age. One of my kids does not know how to shuffle cards yet, and watching them try to do it, and they're teenagers, watching them try to do it is one of the most hilarious things.
My husband is the same way. I'm like, can I help you with that?
Yeah, no, but they're getting so much better. It's just one of those things where it's like, it's a skill. You learn how to do something. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I think about all these little third graders learning to do the bridge. It's like that had to be funny for the teacher to see.
It's amazing, especially, I love it.
Yeah.
Now, you've introduced, as I said, me and others that we work with to tons of games. One of my most favorite recent ones that we picked up and have played actually even recently over break was Mantis,
Ah,
which I love. It was such a good one. But what are you playing now? Like, I know you play a lot of games, but like, what are your top few that you would recommend to folks?
I love games. Upstairs, straight up above me, we have a whole wall that's just board games and everything from, Racco, Scrabble to really what my husband calls nerdy games, Dominion and Splendor. Ones that have 1,000 million pieces, Wingspan. I love those games, but it's hard for me to find someone to play them with because my husband he loves cards and stuff like that. He'll play anything once, but those games that have a lot of phases per turn and stuff, he's not a big fan of. So my oldest son, who just happens to live down the street, Evan, he'll play those games with me, but he just had a baby. Well, his wife just had a baby.
They had a baby.
Yeah. So that has paused a little bit of my gameplay, but over Christmas I had a bunch of company and we played a card game, Hand and Foot. It's kind of like Canasta apparently, which I haven't played, but lots of cards. We play a lot of cards. And my top board game favorites have to be Azul, and there's 4 of those. I like them all. Sagrada, which is like a dice game. You're placing dice. It's beautiful and it's really fun. And then Splendor, and that's where you're purchasing cards, kind of a deck building sort of game.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah, I love those all 3. And I can get pretty much anybody to play those ones with me.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, and the audience doesn't know, but there are times where it's like, you will sit down and try to play a game. And I'm like, it has to be simple for me to understand. If it's going to take me 45 minutes, my kids are good, but you would love playing with them. They would love those super, super complicated, really in-depth games. For me, I'm like, now, if it's not simple for me to understand, if the instruction book's more than like 2 pages, I'm like, nah, this is not good. But I love the fact that you're talking about instructions and teaching people to play games, because obviously, like with Breakout, it's constantly a battle of like, how complicated are the puzzles or how complicated is the gameplay itself. So it's something that you probably subconsciously practice in real life anyway.
And so believe in as a skill for life. So I'm all for it in any setting, whether you're driving in your car or playing a board game or playing one of our games. I think it's so important to be able to interpret,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a vital skill, and that's why these games are important. I don't know, what we like to say is like they're important in and out of the classroom.
Yeah.
Like it's for skills that you're going to need, not just in math class, you're going to need it in real life.
Mm-hmm.
So a question for you about like, just thinking back the journey from 4th, 5th grade teacher to game developer, like literally coding these Breakout Plus games. Like what's that origin story look like? Like what brought you to the classroom to begin with?
That's such a good, I think about that often, and I'm always mind blown at my own path. I always knew from probably 3rd grade that I wanted to be a teacher. And I remember a specific incident in 3rd grade. I had the best teacher, Judy Archer, Davis Elementary, Cheyenne, Wyoming. We still keep in touch. She handed us a thing. It was like a bunny when you turned it one way and a duck when you turned it the other way.
Yeah. Yep.
And I was like, well, I don't want to have to choose to make this a bunny or a duck. So I'm going to just make it like spring themed. So I was coloring it purple, and I loved purple. So it was like win-win. And I remember she came by behind me and she goes, Andrea, my real name. What are you? You're so clever. And she's laughing. And like at the time I felt like they were making fun of me. But in retrospect, I realized, having said things like that to students myself, I know she meant it as like, oh, wow, that's so different. Nobody else thought to do that. And I kind of took it as like I think weird, but in a good way, And so that was always kind of planted in my head. But I loved school. I'm the oldest child. My dad was a teacher, school. So I always secretly knew I was probably going to be a teacher. So I was a little older when I went back to school because I had my son, Evan. I was a bit of a non-traditional student and started a little later, but by then I knew what I wanted to do. I loved learning through college, even the hard classes like science that I didn't, as an elementary kid, think were for me. I had such a more appreciation for learning as an adult. Yeah, like I said, my first year teaching, I got hired as a 4-5 combo, and it was in a tough school, but I didn't know any different. And so every single thing about that year, and honestly the next year and the next year, was just like so much information being thrown at me all the time, and I loved it. I like change. I like being challenged, and I like learning and overcoming, So after about the third year, I was like, oh, I got to try something different. So then I was a math coach, and then I had my other son. Then I went back to the classroom after that and I toggled between fourth and fifth grade year after year. And then I want to say it was my eighth or ninth year of teaching. We had a thing in our district where we got to sign up for what kind of learning path we wanted to do professional development wise. And I thought I'd kind of like to get into some technology. I had two old crummy computers in my classroom that just ran on like floppy disks, but we were starting to hear about the internet and things like that. And it was like, well, I kind of think I would like to learn more about that. And so I took this series of courses with our district technology integration specialist, and she taught us about like RSS feeds and blogs and all these things that I was like, oh, it's fun to have that information. But also I had started this project where I did a word of the day, a la Pee-wee's Big Adventure or Pee-wee Playhouse show. And so I would teach the heck out of one word every single day that I knew we were going to encounter. We would cheer just like Cherry and all the characters did in the show. And I was like, that a blog would be a really cool way to track those words. And I can have my kids respond when they see this word out in the world or when they're at home watching a show. It was so fun. So that really sparked my kind of interest in embedding technology into what I was doing. And so that kind of grew from there. And I think it was in 2012, our town finally passed a mill levy that allowed us to hire 2 more technology integration specialists for the district. And Desiree, who had mentored me through all of that, she said, I think that you should apply for this job. I think you'd be good at it. And I was like, yeah, I think that sounds fun. So I got that job. And in the process of that, I got to travel all over the district. And it was so cool. I wish every teacher had a chance to do that, to go and just watch other people teach. Because, I mean, I saw teachers who taught kids younger than mine help me to understand where my kids were coming from. And also things that I would never want to do, things that I saw could be done better, and I wasn't there to coach them. But for my own personal growth, it was like, this is interesting. And then on the flip side of that, going into older grades and classes, particularly middle school, where I know my kids are headed, it kind of wrapped up the picture for me. And I realized how important it was that kids love to learn too. It doesn't really matter what grade they're in or what subject they're learning. If they think that learning is interesting and fun, they'll eat up anything, science, math, whatever. So one of those years I got to go to ISTE. It was in Denver. And I mean, it was the first time I'd ever been to anything like that. I'd been to math conferences, but it's nothing like the people at ISTE, And I remember seeing this line of people outside. And I was like, what are they waiting for? And there was a school bus. It was like a bus that was parked out there. And there were lines of people every day. I could never even get on it. But I, made a note, check this out when you get back home, see what it is, and get online. And people were buzzing about it all over the conference, as you know. I was like so intrigued by that because as a trainer of teachers, I thought that would be a really cool way to engage teachers in learning, So I ordered a kit as soon as I got home, and I was just like, oh, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. So right away, I started to see how I could help teachers implement those games in their classroom. And so I started taking them out to schools that next fall. And I mean, I just kind of was like mind blown when I saw the conversations that kids were having and the way that teachers just could kind of roam around the room and listen in and really see the kids that never really spoke up actually had amazing ideas. And the little me's that sat in the front and raised their hand all the time were struggling. Like, it was just it really truly was like packaged my educational experience and my teaching experience. Like, this is how I always felt like a classroom should look. So then I was all in. I was like, oh, you need me to write some games? I wrote a game here. You want to publish it? And so I started, to work with Patty a lot. And I think it was maybe a year or so later, I got an email from Adam Bellow, and he's like, can you meet with me on Thursday? And I was like, oh, they're going to break up with me. They're going to tell me that. They're going to tell me that I pester him too much. And that's not at all what happened. You offered me the job, and I never saw it coming. It was amazing. And I mean, it took a lot of, like, do I leave my career? Am I supposed to be a teacher my whole life? That's kind of what I thought I would do. So it was such a surprise, but best decision ever. Sadly, I don't regret leaving the classroom, but I've gotten to learn so many. I get to really challenge that nerdy side of me that loves spreadsheets and procedures and processes, but also really nurture the creative side of me that would color a bunny pink, and putting that all together in a way that I know benefits those kids in classrooms just like makes me so happy.
Yeah. I mean, obviously hearing that is music to my ears and my heart, and knowing you is, I know all of this is 1000% genuine and so real. It's funny because watching you, you said you love challenges and you love to learn. And I feel like working with you day after day for years now, I know that's true. And there are times where it's like a seemingly impossible task where it's like, hey, can you do the impossible? Where normal humans would be like, nope, I don't know how to do this, or, train me or whatever. And it's like, your attitude towards learning is like, I'm going to dig my hands in there and figure it out, because there's nothing that you can't do if you dedicate yourself to it. So I'll pivot the conversation to that challenge and kick it off by saying that, the idea of this Breakout Plus product that we have now, where there's a game that comes out monthly that started launching at the end of September in 23. So we've come out with a bunch of these games. We're on game 15 now or so.
Yeah, starting 16.
Which is amazing. For those that haven't played it, you definitely should give it a shot. Even if you're not a member yet of Breakout EDU, we do offer a free trial. You can get on and play the latest Breakout Plus game. They are basically a modern day point and click adventure game with an educational angle. For those of you that are old enough to have remembered things like Maniac Mansion and the King's Quest and Space Quest games, this is literally what I grew up doing in my childhood. And I always was talking to the team about, like, we should do this. Like this would be such a cool Breakout game. Like, that's exactly what it is. And, Ann and the team dove in head first and really challenged themselves to do this. And so, Ann, I want to kind of, like, from your vantage point, I don't know if you want to expand on, like, both the original idea and opportunity, and then kind of just what were the challenges and learnings, like, encapsulated along the way to get to something that we now have out there. And the last thing I'll say, it's not a question, but to tell you, and that the audience as well, over 1 million kids have played these games. Like,
almost this 1.5 million as of
1.5 million. That's got to feel amazing as a game designer. And just thinking about our mission here at Breakout and what we want to do, forget our company, for thinking about, like, kids in general, like, this is the type of learning we want them to have. So to think about 1.5 million almost kids that are playing this content is just so heartwarming and awesome.
Yeah. And right off, I'll say, I think to me, the bigger picture is, if I can do this, think of what these 10-year-olds who are sitting in fourth grade classrooms today are going to be able to learn and do and figure out, I mean, just blows my mind. Yeah. I remember when you first started talking to us about these games, I'm a little older than you. So I knew of those games, but didn't really play them, but I knew of them. My brothers played them and stuff, and they were definitely out there. And I remember you talking about them and explaining, like, you're in this world and you're sort of wandering around, like being in maybe more of a real escape room. You're touching things and you're picking things up and exploring what it is, and maybe something talks to you. And I was like, oh yeah, that's really cool. That would be neat to have somebody do that. I don't know how they do it. Must be some kind of magic, but so then our games are pretty straightforward, where it's kind of more, I think of it more like graphic design with a twist, because it's just very visual, kind of one shot. you're not interacting with it in the same manner. So I couldn't understand how you could take a static image or a video even, and somebody drags something part of it and it causes another action to occur. And I was just like, I can't even fathom how you do that. And so around that time, I think was when Derek came on board. He's our UI UX designer, and we started really talking to him about the possibility of making these kind of games. And he had showed us I use Illustrator to do most of my designs, and he had been showing us Figma, which is a similar program. And he was showing us how in Figma you can kind of link from objects to objects. And I was like, oh, maybe that's kind of how it works. Like you're just linking things in there. So Patty and I just kind of brainstormed, say this is the format and this is what we're limited to what we can do here. What kind of a game, what would that look like, having the puzzles and the multiple scenes and the items that you can collect? What might that look like in an environment like that? And how many scenes does it take? And where, if they're collecting things, where does that go as far as like an inventory and things like that? So we really just kind of started Patty and I, to learn about it. And it was really intriguing. We kind of mocked up a thing in Figma, and looking at it now, it's basically just Google Slides that link to each other. We just didn't understand how the mechanics of putting that together worked at that time. So I think then we had several spreadsheets of what questions do we have? What do we need to pursue? Who would we seek out in order to find the answers to those questions? And really just kind of at that time, it still seemed like, yeah, I'll help support whoever comes on to do this, because I can make pictures and animations and things for them. That's cool. But then Derek told us that he'd been exploring Unity engine and had found a plugin for that called Adventure Creator. And it was specifically designed to make these point and click games. So he got online with us, Patty and I, and showed us kind of how it works. And I remember being intrigued, but it was a lot of like programming, and not like the Blockly like you do when you do kids with Day of Code, not exactly like that, but they were kind of these chunks where you had an action and then you told it what component you wanted it to act on and what you wanted it to do. And I thought, well, I kind of would like to know how that works, just to make for myself to understand how this is going to go together. Well, Patty and I just happened to, we try to do about once a year where we just get together somewhere. We met in Denver. It's easy for us to both get to Denver, hang out in a hotel for a week and just game jam. It's so fun. But we decided, all right, we're going to go through this tutorial and we're going to figure this out. And I remember being like, I get, I'm sure my husband would be like, that's a pro and a con. I get kind of really dive into something when I get my mind on it, whether it's a hobby or a task. And I was like, no, we're not going to go out to Giordano's yet. I got to figure this out. And just trying to figure out how to actually get an object into a scene, click on it, and have it go to your inventory. Once I finally got it to work, we have a video of it. I was like, yeah, cheering and jumping around. We're in the hotel room. Like, I felt such triumph, because not a week before that, I was like, I don't have any idea how someone does this. And now I just made it happen. And every single thing along the way was like that. Like, I needed to be able to change scenes or open a menu where I can click on things and rearrange them, or all of these little components that I've seen before in gameplay, and so know they can be done. And mind you, they made these games in the 80s. So if they could do it then, I should be able to figure out how to do it now. And it just became like obsessed with, I will figure this out. There have been many times when we've gotten on and let me just talk this through with you out loud. You don't even have to know what I'm saying. Just saying it out loud to somebody and having another set of eyes. I just find that there's no more thrilling experience than thinking you can't do something and then realizing you just did it and you can do it again. Like that. I love it. I love it.
It's incredible. I mean, I think it's a Disney quote it's kind of fun to do the impossible. Like the fact is, and from my vantage point, you told that whole story, and obviously there's a tremendous amount of effort and time that went into that learning process for you. For me, what I saw was just like sharing these ideas, you guys being like, yeah, that would be very cool. And then waiting till you came back from that game jam trip with Patty and just showed me the first workings of what I think became our second game, which was Dr. Bohr, not Dr. Bohr,
or Dr. Merida
Bailey. Yeah. Dr. Bohr is thinking of the bus. Yeah. So like watching that come, and I just was gobsmacked at the fact that you had figured it out. And then watching the inner workings of how it actually gets put together. There's a great blog post for those that are listening that want to learn more about the kind of the minutia here. There's a great blog post that Monica, who we referenced before, wrote about Ann and the process of building Breakout Plus. That's on our blog that shows a couple of screenshots of what it looks like. It is wild. Like the amount of effort and real like coding and programming that goes into making these games is just incredible. And the fact that you self-taught it is just wonderful.
I never would have ever anywhere on my path would have thought that would even be something I'd be interested in or good at or whatever. But in a way, when I think back to, I love spreadsheets. I love formulas. Like I love games. It all kind of works together. I guess anybody could really do anything they put their mind to. I wouldn't want to be a surgeon, but somebody took the time to learn to do operations or really tasks that anybody is good at doing. They started somewhere.
Sure.
I just think being open to adventure, that's kind of my life motto, take all the adventures, being open to try something new, being willing to fail at it and learn from it and try again in a different way. Not only is something that I feel like so thrilled to have been able to do through this whole job, but also knowing that that's what we're helping kids to learn to do and helping teachers facilitate kids to learn to do. That just makes me so happy.
Love that. I was literally going to segue into like advice that you would give to learners, but I think you just gave it. Like, being willing to try and fail. And I mean, it's literally what we try to do with all the games, but I can't stress this enough. And again, it's not because we're talking. I know I've said these things to you privately on our conversations, but like, just to put it out there, like the fact that you tackled this with funstration, I would say, where you have those moments of elation of getting through the roadblock, but also just like not quitting. I mean, now it's part of the job and like we have to produce one a month. So there's like a stake there. But at the same point, that wasn't the case when we started. You could have come back to the drawing board and been like, this is a great idea and I'll help do it with the skill set I have, but I won't grow to have the other skills. And you kind of just floored everybody with the fact that you were able to just pick this up and do it out of sheer will and dedication. But I love it.
With my own brain.
Yeah, which is amazing. And I love that with kids though, too, because it's like that, you said something that resonated with me. As a kid, I was always good at the things that I worked my hardest at, like selective learning. Like I really love this, so I did really well in that. And if I didn't like it, I didn't often challenge myself to do well at that. And for you, it's one of those things where it's like, you prove that you could do this. Kids, I think, listening, if there are any students listening, or if there are people listening that are just like, I want to try something. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't have to be a career change. It doesn't have to be any sort of like giant change. A hobby, something new that you haven't wanted to tackle yet because you were afraid of it. I cannot think of a person that's, in my life, literally, and I mean this honestly and truly, that has taken on a challenge with like, not reckless abandon. Like you're very thoughtful about what you go into, but that take all the adventures attitude and been able to just crush it. Just crush it is just, it's really special to watch.
Well, I appreciate that. And we get emails now that are, well, there's an error in this game, or we weren't able to complete the game because there's this little problem in there. We test and we test and we test and we try to figure those out. All of us together on the team have learned together kind of the importance of, it's hard to come up with a story and a premise and then the art and then the programming. It uses such different sections of my mind. Like I really have to rely on you for story ideas and Patty for puzzle support and Monica for putting that all together in a concise, clear way. And Yulia, one of our dev team, like she has such a mind for solving puzzles and how to make them work the way they should. And Derek, I mean, it was everybody on the team. I could not possibly do it by myself. It truly is. Yeah, I learned some things, but I also really have to rely on the people in my team to help make it happen and continue to support it after it's been out. So that I am honored to be able to do that too.
Well, we're thrilled that you're doing it. I'm sure that there's 1.5 million kids out there that are also thrilled you're doing it, which is just so fun to think of that. And, we have a whole bunch of different types of games at Breakout Plus being one of them. We have our lock of the day, and we have our lesson content games, our digital games, our physical games. Like, there's so much other stuff that we offer, but this is one of those newer components, and it's exciting to kind of see this flourish as well. I asked, you kind of gave great life advice, but I would imagine that there's adults listening, or potentially even some students that are listening, they're curious about game design. What would you say, and it's not specific to our type of game with Breakout Plus, but like, what would you say if someone's interested in creating a game? It could be a board game, it could be whatever. Like, what would you give them as first steps for where to go?
Yeah, I would say the number one thing you could do if you want to make a game is play games, because there's so many different mechanics of how a game goes together, and that fairness aspect of making sure that it's winnable and that there's that nobody gets crushed. That said, having that element of being able to make a mistake and fix it, I think goes into the design as well as the playing. If you make something, have people test it, because you might think, oh, this is great, I got it nailed. And then you pass it off to somebody else and they play differently than you. They do things you never even would have thought of doing. They're going to catch things that you wouldn't have caught. So being willing to be open-minded and listening to feedback, I'd say, is also super important. But just try it. Honestly, if you have an idea, whether it's a game or anything else, attempt it and start small if that's what it takes, but build from there and be willing to screw it up or put it aside for a little while and come back to it. I think that's part of the adventure of just learning and trying something new. You never know if you're going to be good at it.
I mean, words to live by, words to literally live by. And again, watching you, knowing you and getting to work so closely with you, like, I know that you live that. Like, as you're saying that, I'm thinking of a conversation we had yesterday about a game where we got stuck somewhere, and now you're working on a second rev or whatever. Like, it's so true. And I love that advice. I think that that's super, super smart. So, well, thanks. I mean, is there anything else you want to share? I feel like this has been so great to kind of recap your journey here, not only to Breakout, but to this Plus idea. Anything I'm missing?
I mean, if you're people who are listening probably are at least aware of Breakout or the path of it anyway. I just believe in it so much. I'm so honored to be part of it, and think if it's something that you're doing in your class with your kids or with your kids at home or whatever, it will pay off in ways you might not even realize yet. And if you're not doing it, you should, because it's, developing that kind of problem solving and ability to look at a situation and attempt something knowing that it might not be right. There's no harm in trying again. I think that's just such a powerful thing for future humans. So
totally agree.
Yay, Breakout.
It has been, well, this commercial has been paid for by, no, like, it's been awesome to get to chat and kind of shed light on your story and what you've been working so hard at. We're actually going to be interviewing some other folks on the team coming up. So we'll be talking to Patty, who's the other director of games, but so great to just get to kind of let your story get out there. I think it's so inspiring, and the energy you bring to everything you do here, I couldn't appreciate it more. And so thanks for sharing. And until the next time, everybody, game on.